Perhaps some of the worst devastation to occur along Alabama's Gulf Coast took place along the miles of Gulf Shore beaches. The city is still littered with debris and under the control of state officials. From this church, state trooper, National Guard, and governor's office officials run the massive cleanup operation. Several hundred state prison work release inmates are taking debris to restricted burn sites. Other than these sites, all outdoor burning is banned because of the potential outbreak of forest fires. For miles, fallen trees are drying out and turning brown. Security in Gulf Shores is tight in order to prevent looting, and officials say it's working. Residents of the area only can enter, and as of today, must not worry about a curfew. 60% of the power is restored to the Gulf Shore area. In the downtown area, at least 2 restaurants have finally been able to reopen. Officials are still recommending that drinking water be boiled, but for those who can't, these red and white containers hold sealed, fresh water at no charge. Fishing and swimming in the ocean has been banned because of the sewage contamination. Governor James flew into Gulf Shores this morning to view the cleanup operation. James says he's impressed with the work that's being done to clean up and assist the Gulf Shore residents. James toured briefly through the command post where residents can also pick up free food. James, accompanied by some of his relatives, then left to see what was left of their property along the Gulf Coast. The most violent side of Hurricane Frederick is suspected of having moved inland across these beaches. For every house now left, 3 others once existed. Very little property was left unscathed, including the state's executive mansion, the home of former U.S. Senator James Allen, Governor James's private home, Gulf Shores State Super Park, and much, much more. Here, National Guard troops are uncovering a beachside road now buried by sand dunes that once rested several hundred yards closer to the water's edge. As awesome and as devastating as the hurricane was, officials say that the attitude of the people of Gulf Shores is even more tremendous. Despite the fact that it could take years to return to normal, the townspeople are approaching it with optimism. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News, Gulf Shores, Alabama.
Two memos and an agreement form tell the story of the missing ASU marching Hornets at halftime during the Hornets' victory over Livingston. One document from band members to Dr. Thomas Lyle, band director, charges that a white assistant band director wants to change the now famous Hornet dance and drill routine from the traditional soulful struts and other patterns most of the alumni expects to see to what one band member told me is a straight march style similar to that of predominantly white schools. The administration memo, signed by President Levi Watkins, says an investigation shows evidence of racial overtones and intimidation by members of the band. Watkins adds in his memo to band members, the school is under federal court order and will not tolerate racist attitudes from any students or faculty at ASU. The unsigned and undated agreement form issued to some band members says that the person signing the form will agree to abide by all rules of the school and will show up for band practice. Those not signing, says that agreement, automatically lose financial privileges and participation in the band. ASU President Watkins is continuing his probe into the matter and says the school will prosecute any band member violating school rules and federal law.
Unless the two sides, the university and the band members, can come to terms to help solve this controversy, what Dr. Watkins says at the end of his memo could be a hint of things to come. He says, and I'm quoting now, "Your cooperation," meaning the band members, "will avoid discontinuance of the band for the 1979-80 season." This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News on the campus of Alabama State University.
Since being here in Alabama, someone said to me that they find it very difficult to believe that consumers could get ripped off through the sale of Holy Bibles. It is quite possible that you can get ripped off through the sale of Holy Bibles if they're sold at your doorstep, and if after you look through it, it does not contain the kind of reference, the kind of information that the salesperson told you that was contained therein. If after you examine it, if after you look at the contract, find out how much you're going to have to pay for it, what the terms are, you have 3 days in which to cancel. However, you must do so in writing. You should do so by certified mail, return receipt requested, so that you will have proof that you did cancel it, or you may do it by telegram, but it should be done by midnight of the 3rd business day. That is to regulate the sale of door-to-door sales, because so often we found that a lot of housewives and consumers were ripped off during the day while their husbands were away and that sort of thing. And not only through the sale of Bibles, but I might mention a lot of people have gotten ripped off through the sale of magazines from door-to-door sales.
The Medicaid program.
State Medicaid officials say a way must be found to control the rising cost of the program. One way is to cut benefits. These people showed up at a public hearing to voice their opinions on the proposal. According to Henry Vaughn, the administrator of the state's medical services, they hope to save between $10 and $12 million a year by reducing benefits in 4 areas. Hospital benefits could be cut from 30 days to 20. Nursing home guidelines changed to make admission requirements tougher. Under the plan, prescription drugs would be limited for the first time, and eye care would be changed to further limit the purchase of contact lenses. Reaction to the benefit cuts has been negative and has prompted some, like Ezra Cunningham, to question the validity of the affluent people he says makes decisions for the poor.
Here's the time that maybe we need to leave here and go across to the building over there and say, Brother Bob, Brother Fob, this is the new beginning, that we are beginning to be people to come to tell you, Brother Fob James, that you need to listen to us when you make your decision to cut out the Medicaid or to cut out anything else that affects poor people.
The pleas of poor people at this hearing not to cut Medicaid benefits appears to be political pressure against the administration. If this doesn't work, the more likely course is in the courts. There are strong indications that at least 2 organizations plan to file for temporary restraining orders against the Medicaid benefit cut. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
The marchers congregated at the scene of the shooting, Cook's Grocery, in a predominantly black section of Selma. On Monday evening, September 17th, 19-year-old Henry Miles, a black man, was shot and killed by the grocery store's owner, Clarence Cook, a white man. According to police reports, Cook had a confrontation with Miles earlier that evening, but did not sign a warrant. About an hour later, Miles returned to the grocery and reportedly broke through a window. Cook then shot Miles once in the chest. He later died at a local hospital. Later that week, Clarence Cook was charged with first-degree murder and then released on a $10,000 bond. Selma City Councilman F.D. Reese, one of the organizers, says the march was staged to protest what he calls the low value put on a black life in Selma.
We regret very much that the bond that was signed on this particular person was only $10,000. And we feel that that's a very low bond, and of course we feel that black life needs to be regarded at a high value. And this march today will indicate to all our community that we are concerned about this.
Today's march has evidently angered at least one section of the white population in Selma. A Ku Klux Klan organizer says counter marches are planned in the future. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News in Selma, Alabama. Today's march was prompted by the shooting of 19-year-old Henry Miles, a black man, by the owner of this grocery store, Clarence Cook, a white man. The incident occurred last Monday night. Cook was not formally charged until 2 days later. He is now free on $10,000 bond. The marchers feel the police investigation was not handled properly, but Selma Mayor Carl Morgan says he is, for the most part, satisfied with the Selma police handling of the case.
I would say possibly we may have made a couple of errors in judgment. However, frankly, as far as the arrest and the apprehension of the of Mr. Cook. I feel that it was done basically in normal police routine manner.
Around 300 people began the march. Their ranks swelled to 500 or so as they made their way through downtown Selma, walking two abreast. The marchers stopped along the way at the home of Henry Miles' mother. A brief prayer was said. They also stopped in front of the Selma Times-Journal newspaper. The marchers feel the paper did not fairly present both sides of the story when it happened a week ago. Organizers here say no more marches will be held until they see how the case is being handled in the courts. But they will be holding mass meetings to keep the case in the public eye. The first of those mass meetings tomorrow night. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News, Selma, Alabama.
Watkins says the proper procedure for filing complaints have not been followed by band members. The school head added that no racially motivated complaints against white assistant band directors will be accepted as legitimate. A university source told me that ASU officials are investigating numerous beatings, intimidation, and other severe forms of hazing alleged by at least 30 freshman band members. I was told today further by that source that parents of some band members complained of bruises and other injuries they noticed when the students came home on visits. ASU officials are also looking into charges that some lower-classmen were forced to go out late at night to purchase food for senior band members, and that some upper-class members allegedly extorted money from new band members.
The university's investigation into allegations that at least 30 band members were beaten and hazed by upperclassmen is expected to take at least 3 weeks before a final report is made public. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News on the campus of Alabama State University.
Yes.
This race.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure for me to present you my check for
Be the bomber class. That's the cheaper, less expensive.
I want to work hard. Mr. Jones, if anybody tries to get that back now, don't you let them have it back. I know. Yeah, that's right. Don't give it to any of them.
Is that all?
Although food prices have decreased significantly, the retail price is up this month. In a monthly survey, the Alabama Farm Bureau shows its market basket of 20 items up 1.8% over August. Beef and dairy products have led the supermarket increases. However, survey director Dick Fifield says there were items that stayed the same or dropped in price.
Actually, we had an unchanged picture in pork, which you would expect with the large numbers of pork in the marketplace, a decrease in the price of poultry, and a very, very small increase in the price of beef. It looks like poultry and beef are or poultry and pork are holding the price down in beef at this point in time.
Fifield says a special 3-month survey showed that farm and roadside markets provided a considerable savings for produce, 29 to 30% over supermarkets. He said although supermarket prices are higher, the consumer must pay for off-farm costs of labor, transportation, packaging, marketing, and spoilage. Farmers using the roadside markets for selling reported increased income. However, they said they could not effectively market large quantities with this method. Ivy Berman, WSFA TV News reporting.
The committee will be examining 2 aspects of radiation and nuclear power. One, the nuclear power plants in the state and how they are monitored, along with the uses of X-rays in industry and medicine. Some members of the committee believe they will only have time to address one of these areas. Representative Larry Dixon of Montgomery says perhaps the problems encountered in the medical field of certification and calibration of X-ray machines can be solved by more staff to perform the functions of inspection. Several others agreed and said the committee should spend its time looking at the nuclear power and fuel industry in the state. On Wednesday, the committee will be briefed by the state health department on their involvement with nuclear monitoring of both power plants and X-ray machines. Committee Chairman Tommy Ed Roberts of Hartselle says he believes they would have formed the committee even if the 3 Mile Island incident had not occurred.
They'll have to have an additional people in the state of Alabama adequately trained and schooled in this field to be able to become as involved in it as we need to. The future is in these areas that we're talking about. And as industrial-minded and growth that the state of Alabama is, if we're going to move in that area, we certainly need the people and the involvement to handle this type growth.
As far as legislation is concerned, Roberts says this will depend upon what the state already has and what other states are doing in the field. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
We started off in regular session with
The marchers congregated at the scene of the shooting, Cook's Grocery, in a predominantly black section of Selma. On Monday evening, September 17th, 19-year-old Henry Miles, a black man, was shot and killed by the grocery store's owner, Clarence Cook, a white man. According to police reports, Cook had a confrontation with Miles earlier that evening, but did not sign a warrant. About an hour later, Miles returned to the grocery and reportedly broke through a window. Cook then shot Miles once in the chest. He later died at a local hospital. Later that week, Clarence Cook was charged with first-degree murder and then released on a $10,000 bond. Selma City Councilman F.D. Reese, one of the organizers, says the march was staged to protest what he calls the low value put on a black life in Selma.
We regret very much that the bond that was signed on this particular person was only $10,000. And we feel that that's very low bond, and of course we feel that black life needs to be regarded at a high value. And this march today will indicate to all our community that we are concerned about this.
Today's march has evidently angered at least one section of the white population in Selma. A Ku Klux Klan organizer says counter marches are planned in the future. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News in Selma, Alabama.
Some council members said they voted for the parade permit because this sect of the Ku Klux Klan is separate from the one whose members were arrested for carrying weapons at a march in August. Councilman Reed and Oliver voted against the permit, and Harris abstained. In other business, the council voted to allow the mayor to make arrangements with the state for the long-awaited widening of Perry Hill Road. And the mayor demonstrated to council members how the new method of police patrolling will work. Beginning October 1st, the city will be divided into 15 districts so that each area will be better patrolled. The mayor says with more districts, the police department will need to hire more officers and crime should be reduced. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
That's really the problem, is after a while you have too many staff, and that's not doing too much radiation work is done. Now, we do need X-ray position, but that's not funding, it's going to try creating another thing. We are trying to get another one creating X-ray. Maybe that's going to put the whole body exposed. And the part of the body. Doing body weighing 400, coming up almost to 700.
For about 2 years, the Department of Environmental Regulation of the state of Florida has worked to establish an estuarine sanctuary in and around the Apalachicola Bay. Such a designation would enable the state of Florida to eventually preserve 190,000 acres. Officials in Georgia and Alabama became concerned about a year ago that this sanctuary would mean reduction or elimination of navigation on the Tri-River system, which includes the Apalachicola, Flint, and Chattahoochee rivers. The Flint and Chattahoochee rivers originate in Georgia and drain Alabama and Georgia. In recent years, barge traffic on the system has become more and more important to the economy and development of southeast Alabama and southwest Georgia. Officials in these two states objected to the sanctuary because of possible adverse effects on navigation. Several meetings were held at which state officials, including the 3 governors, discussed the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and its job of keeping the rivers open. As a result of these meetings, the state of Florida will have to comply with some special award conditions before any of the $1.7 million can be spent on buying the rest of the sanctuary land. Most of these conditions deal with dredging and spoil disposal from the Corps' maintenance program for the river system. As long as the Corps of Engineers is able to obtain the necessary permits from Florida to dredge the Apalachicola River, Alabama and Georgia officials say they have no objections to the sanctuary. It will be several more years before the sanctuary is fully operating, but another disagreement could still arise between Alabama, Georgia, and Florida on how the sanctuary will be managed. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
During the 5 months Robert Britton has been head of the state's prison system, the accomplishment he boasts the most is increased production from the system's various facilities. Britton says all inmates coming into the system must first work on the farm where soybeans and other garden crops are grown. His goal here is to make the prison system self-sufficient in its food needs. Behind these workers are chicken houses where egg production already meets prison population needs. The production also extends to pork and beef. Britton comes from Texas, where the prison system makes money instead of costs money as Alabama's system does. To accomplish this, Britton says all inmates are put to productive jobs where they not only learn to respect a day's work, but can earn good time credits. In addition to this slaughtering facility, the system boasts its own cannery and freezing facilities. Britton's primary job was to comply with federal guidelines, and that, he says, is accomplished. Still to come are improved medical services, reclassification of inmate status, and perhaps most difficult, locating at least 3 sites for new prisons. Britton says at least 1,600 state inmates are still in county facilities, adding to their overcrowding problems. Britton says the bottom line is harder work, better in-house conditions, which lead to better morale, improved food services, and compliance with the federal court guidelines. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News, Draper Correctional Institute. Eliminating taxes on food and drugs has been an unrealized campaign promise for Governor James, but he's still pushing the idea. The push is now being made to members of the Joint Interim Committee on Tax Structures.
I feel very strongly that this next session we need to find a way to eliminate the sales tax on food and prescription drugs without penalizing anybody or any governmental service by so doing.
Taxes on food and drugs bring in nearly $80 million a year, and committee members want to know where James might find a replacement for this money.
You might look at some corporate tax structures. You might look at some things like making state tax exemptions similar, the same as federal tax exemptions.
Another tax consideration once top on James's list is an increased gasoline tax that was only hinted at.
The members of the Joint Committee made it clear to Governor James that before they would cut off tax revenues from one area, it would have to be recouped elsewhere. Governor James said that in early October he would have much more solid plans to offer that could be considered before January budget hearings. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the state capitol.
During each of the past 5 years, American consumers lost more than $489 million through mail fraud and misrepresentation. The most prevalent of those schemes are get-rich-quick gimmicks, investment offers, miraculous cure-alls, and weight-reducing plans. Montgomery Postmaster J.D. Williams says the best way to protect yourself against these schemes is to check into them carefully.
Well, when you get these advertisements through the mail, which seem to be too good to be true, the best thing to do is to investigate before you spend any money at all on any kind of scheme, no matter what it is. In other words, get in touch with the Chamber of Commerce or the Better Business Bureau at the office where the circular material was mailed out from.
Many people don't report the frauds because they're embarrassed about being taken in. But Williams says to notify the Postal Service and the matter will be turned over to the Postal Inspector's Office for investigation. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
If the team does prepare correctly, it should win the game?
I think so.
You think you have better personnel?
Yeah, I sure do.
It isn't every week you get Coach Bryant to speak so frankly about his team. But then it isn't every week the Tide faces Vanderbilt. The Commodores are having their problems this season. They are without a win, having lost to Indiana and Citadel. You would not classify either of those schools as football powerhouses. The Vanderbilt defense is yielding more than 35 points per game. One publication lists Vanderbilt as one of the worst 20 teams in the nation. That is not to say the Commodores are without talent. Running back Frank Mordecai leads the SEC in rushing and could probably start for any team in the nation. But as Coach Bryant says, the Tide does have better personnel, better depth. The problem lies in getting the team ready for a supposedly weak team.
And they're going to have one different color's jersey, and it's a contest, and we could lose it very easily, but if we improve in our preparation, that's what we're trying to do. If we just improve, I think we'd be all right. You don't stand still in football. You either move up or go down. You don't stay in one place.
Vanderbilt traditionally plays Alabama hard. Do you have any idea why is that?
Well, I don't know. Everybody plays us hard. Why does Auburn play us hard? Tennessee, they all play us hard. I don't think anybody likes us.
Vanderbilt has a very good reason for not liking Coach Bryant. The Bear has a 22-2-1 record against the Commodores. He should notch victory number 23 this weekend in Nashville. Fred Albers, WSFA TV Sports. If the Tigers can repeat this kind of tackling on Saturday, Auburn will be in good shape. The War Eagles had 8 quarterback sacks against Southern Mississippi. Leading the way, Freddie Smith. The linebacker had 3 tackles behind the line, 2 quarterback sacks, and was the game's leading tackler. You would think that kind of performance would have Coach Barfield wearing a smile, but there is great concern about Tennessee's speed this week.
Well, you know, I guess you go back to that old saying like Jake Gaither said a few years ago, you know, you split them out wide, and if they split with you, you run north and south. If don't, you run east and west. You don't run east and west too much against Tennessee because of their speed on defense, and then defending them, you better channel everything to the middle, hopefully, where you can hem them up. Those are ideas that you have to explore in trying to contain their speed.
The War Eagles offense appeared to gain momentum last week. 31 points is not a shabby performance. But the scores came on big plays, and quarterback Charlie Trotman says the team is still looking for consistency.
We hadn't done the things that it's going to take to have a great offensive ball club throughout the year. You know, there's certain plays that we've executed well, but we have to continue to execute all the plays well if we want to beat Tennessee or any of the teams remaining on our schedule.
What specifically are you going to have to change? You're going to have to improve on this weekend?
Well, I think consistency is the main word, the key. We have to try to do things on every play that it takes to make the big play. Instead of just waiting for a big play to happen, you have to try to go out and make a consistent gain, say 4 or 5 yards on every play. Have that as your goal and try to go from there.
Is Tennessee the best team you've played so far?
I think they definitely will be because they have the potential to be really good. They've played two teams that really weren't, in their caliber of ball, especially Utah, and I think that they, just outplayed them, especially in the second half, warmed down, things like that. They'd definitely be better than Southern Miss and Kansas State.
All 5 of Catherine Caswell's opponents say their district lacks representation. Many of them cite her frequent absences from city council meetings as evidence of that. In her 4-year term, she has missed about 1/3 of the meetings, and in the past 2 years, she was absent from 59 of 108 meetings. Mrs. Caswell says she has been ill, and that's why she's been absent. But she thinks her health is better now, and she wants another term. She also claims she hasn't been doing a poor job as councilwoman, and points out that attending council meetings is only part of the job. Mrs. Caswell says she's proud of her accomplishments in District 4, including improved sewage, a reduced crime rate, and installation of streetlights and sidewalks. She wants to promote more industry and jobs for the West Side and more recreational opportunities. She's 62, divorced with 1 son, and owns a community grocery store. She was a school teacher for 41 years and says it's important to realize that no one council member can get anything done without the votes of 4 others. 49-year-old Dorothy Darrington has also been a school teacher. She now runs a preschool. She says the district needs leadership to get more recreational facilities and senior citizen programs. She's also concerned about sanitation and sewage problems, and her pet project is to get guardrails installed on Day Street. She's married and has 4 sons. Another candidate, Mark Gilmore Jr., was unavailable to be filmed. He works in the Secretary of State's office and says he wants to make sure District 4 gets its share of benefits. He has expressed concern over poor drainage ditches, sewer systems, and streets and sidewalks. He also wants more playgrounds for children. Riley Lewis Jr. ran for the District 4 seat in 1976. He, too, says the area needs leadership. He wants to organize the district block by block and hold monthly meetings in each area. He thinks with unity the district can correct the problems of poor drainage, lighting, and lack of sidewalks. He also wants to institute a police review board that's separate from the city administration. Lewis is 52, unmarried, and distributes cleaning products. Timothy Mays says the West Side could be the richest district in the city, but instead it's the most poverty-prone. He says he's gotten so disgusted with the lack of representation he has taken some problems to the mayor. He says he's attended most council meetings in the past few years, so he's familiar with the procedure. Among his goals are to attract business to District 4, to get rid of all outdoor toilets in the area, and to see to it that drainage ditches are cleaned regularly. He's 35, married, has 2 children, and is sales manager of a clothing store. 52-year-old Frank Taylor runs a cleaners in District 4. He, too, ran for the seat in 1976. He says lack of representation has caused the loss of many government funds for his area. He would like to see some of that money go toward creating non-profit job-producing organizations. He also wants better paved streets and sidewalks. Taylor is married and has 4 children. If no one candidate in District 4 gets over 50% of the vote, there will be a runoff October 30th. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
They were the beautiful people, Maureen and Morris. He, a controversial civil rights lawyer and expert fundraiser. She, a beautiful actress and expert theatrical director. Rumors of divorce surfaced last year, but they were squelched when it was announced that the two were getting along okay. Today's divorce decree put an end to speculation that Maureen would receive a huge chunk of the Dees cattle and land empire, and that the attorney was guilty of misusing poverty law center funds collected by him to help defend death row inmates. In a settlement worked out in days of closed hearings this summer, Judge Newman Sankey ordered that Mrs. Dees receive alimony of $120,000, child support of $1,500 a month for their daughter Ellie, and that her ex-husband Morris Dees pay all medical expenses for the child. Each of them was allowed to keep their personal cars and all gifts received during their marriage, and to divide any household furnishings acquired during their union. Judge Sankey wrote that Mrs. Dees had come into the marriage with no assets while living in a rented house. Maureen Dees will not receive any of the wealth accumulated by Dees before she married him. That is set at $2 million. Judge Sankey added that he found no evidence of misuse of Southern Poverty Law Center funds. Mrs. Dees had charged that her husband used a $5 million trust fund owned by the center to take private trips and to pay for personal items. Morris Dees is ordered to begin alimony and child support payments October 1st. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
Willie Peake is the present councilman in the 1st District. He's also president of the City Council, a position he feels helps qualify him for a 2nd term. Like many incumbents, Peake says he runs on his record. He says he's helped improve Perry Hill Road and complete a baseball field at AUM. He considers crime his district's #1 problem and wants to continue neighborhood crime prevention programs. He also wants to start a project to preserve District 1's trees, and he wants to work for an ordinance to prevent property owners from allowing unsightly junk to accumulate on their land. A native of Montgomery, Peake's business is selling school supplies. He's 47, married, and has 3 daughters. 30-year-old Louis Lincoln is new to city politics. He thinks that's a plus because he says he wants to return the government to the hands of ordinary working people. He rises early every morning to get to his job installing automatic sprinkler systems. He thinks he's qualified to be a councilman because he doesn't mind getting his hands dirty. Lincoln wants to encourage growth by allowing new businesses to pay a smaller fee for a business license than established companies. He also thinks persons who live outside of Montgomery but work in the city should pay a non-resident fee. Lincoln wants to establish monthly community meetings, and he says residents should be less concerned about individual districts and more concerned about the city as a whole. Lincoln is married and has 2 sons. Johnny Martin is the 3rd District 1 candidate. He's 34, unmarried, and makes home repairs. In his 25 years in Montgomery, he says he's seen city government go from bad to worse. He wants to repeal what he calls Mickey Mouse ordinances, such as the regulation allowing the city to cut weeds on private property, weeds which Martin says are part of the city's natural beauty. He's also against forced busing, he wants better timed traffic signals, and he wants all government functions open to the public. Tomorrow, a look at District 2 candidates. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
For the next 3 days, 25 of the best bass fishermen in the world will be chunking for a total of $50,000 in prize money. And just so everybody begins even, Each Bassmaster is outfitted with an identical, fully appointed classic boat worth over $11,000. If fish were submarines, these boats would blow them out of the water. 115 horse motors enable the Bassmaster to cover this huge lake, all 89,000 acres, and still make it in by quitting time. There's a troll motor, not one but 3 depth sounding units to show you where the fish concentrations are. A very sophisticated live well system. Bass is very sensitive about killing the catch, requiring all tournament boats to have live wells so fish can be returned. They claim 80% of bass caught are returned to the lake alive. Early this morning, the bass anglers and their partners, members of the media, were towed to the launch site. They stay in their boat from the time they leave headquarters until they're brought back in the same manner in the afternoon. The boats are launched in 3 flights, 10 minutes apart. When the signal is given, the Bassmasters head for their favorite spot, and they don't mess around. Each minute is worth about 3 casts, and they never know when that big strike is coming. Once on the scene, it's a matter of concentration, hard work, belief in what you're doing, and of course some luck. One thing I noticed about these professionals, they can put their bait in your vest pocket at 75 feet, and they never quit throwing, because they fully expect to catch the biggest bass of the day on the next throw. Late Friday afternoon, when everything is totaled up, one of these 25 will win a sizable amount of money and all the advantages that go with being a Bassmasters Classic champion. Roland Martin, Angler of the Year for the 6th time in the 9-year history of bass, is still looking for his first Bassmasters Classic victory.
Well, I tell you, Texoma is really a great gentle giant. It's here in my home state, and I fish Lake Eufaula, which is a little bigger than Texoma, and then I fished a little bit here in Texoma. It's so big that there's a lot of different viable patterns working. I only tried about 2 or 3 patterns today, mainly worked the upper, shallower, muddier end of the lake. Maybe tomorrow I might try, say, some of the steep rocky banks down by the dam, trying some deep worm patterns, trying some jigging patterns. But today I was mainly throwing spinner baits and crankbaits and flipping. And I didn't catch all that many fish, but I really didn't get onto them. I need more time, and I'm just hoping the next 3 days will give me more time.
District 2's incumbent, Louis Golson, says he wants to be re-elected so he can continue to try and correct the poor drainage. Golson says he's already gotten a number of streets resurfaced and streetlights installed. He's also proud of expansion of the Montgomery Zoo, which is in his district. Golson has a lively interest in sports and would like to increase the recreational facilities in District 2. He's 55, married, and has 2 children. He owns a janitorial supply company. 38-year-old Juanita Foshi also thinks the young people in District 2 need more parks and playgrounds. She says she's tired of her district being treated as a stepchild. In addition to better drainage, she wants to see more industry in her area and special programs for the elderly, including a tax exemption on drugs. Mrs. Foshi has 3 children and works in her husband's piano repair business. Clarence Helms is a 55-year-old contractor. He thinks his experiences working on homes and handling heavy equipment can help him in solving drainage and other problems. He, too, is concerned about area youth and would like a swimming pool in the 2nd District. Helms also thinks the city should have more police and firemen, and he says senior citizens who are former city employees should get more money from the city. Helms is married and has 3 children. Conducting what he calls the cleanest race in Montgomery is John Whitaker. The 57-year-old salesman and owner of a gift shop has 5 children. He thinks the youth in District 2 need more discipline and training, as well as more places for recreation. He's also concerned about the mosquitoes in his area and some dangerous blind corners. Whitaker wants to be a councilman because he says he's gotten so much from the city, he wants to give something back. A 5th District 2 candidate, George Thomas May, has withdrawn from the race. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
It's called AFOS, an acronym for Automation of Field Observations and Services. It's a computerized communications system now being installed in National Weather Service offices around the country, and those who will work with the new system are excited about the expected benefits.
Well, the greatest advantage with this system is going to be rapid communications. It's going to speed up almost everything we do. We won't have to depend on long-line teletype systems for communications. Things will be fed directly from computer to computer.
Weather charts depicting various levels of the atmosphere are essential to the work of meteorologists, and these will be automatically fed and updated from the National Forecast Center computer in Washington. Until now, such charts have been transmitted to Weather Service offices through a time-consuming facsimile process, producing paper maps which are not always easy to compare. AFOS is designed to help.
We can see several layers of the atmosphere looking at one chart, where now we have to look at one chart, put it in our mind, and look at another chart, and compare those two within our minds. Now we can look at them directly on a video display.
Record keeping will be revolutionized by AFOS, says Pettit. The computer will tally the hourly temperatures, pressures, winds, and other such readings which define Montgomery's weather, automatically sending summaries of the most important data directly to the Weather Service Archives computer in Nashville. For the public, however, the day-to-day chores carried out by the AFOS computer will not be so important as the work it will do during severe weather.
Well, we're going to have major benefits in this area because the present procedure that we use now, we have to get the message, write it down, information on a sheet of paper, then come to our teletype machine, type out the whole format, which is a pretty lengthy proposition to do to start with. This takes anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how fast the person can type and get the information on the teletype. Then it goes out over 75 word per minute machine down to the media or whoever's using it. With this system, we'll have the formats already put into the computer. We call up the format, we just fill in a few blanks giving the date, time, so forth, and then a couple of lines giving the information that's needed, and all the coding and routing and everything else will be done by the computer. So you're talking about approximately 1 minute versus 5 to 10 minutes with the old method.
AFOS is a complex system which is not yet fully operational, but in 6 to 12 months, says Pettit, it should be giving the Weather Service staff the jump on routine drudgery and South Alabamians the jump on stormy weather. This is Dan Atkinson reporting.
Montgomery Iron and Metal Works has been in the recycling business for many years, but they are now branching out into aluminum recycling. Anything made out of aluminum, beverage cans, lawn furniture, house siding can be recycled. The current price is 24 cents a pound. The aluminum is put into this magnetic separator which removes all the steel cans and other non-aluminum objects. The aluminum is then blown into a bin and crushed into neat 40-pound bales. The bales are shipped off to be melted down and made into new aluminum products. The people at Montgomery Iron and Metal are hoping to recycle 200 tons of aluminum a month. And Assistant Manager John Sullivan says it's a good way for churches and other groups to raise money.
Well, we hope that the schools and civic organizations will try to save the cans and bring them in, and they can make the money for any project they have, like air-conditioned lunchroom, or saving some money for some special project, like equipping the football team, or just anything they might have that they need.
Sullivan adds that aluminum recycling is good for the environment, and he says if Alabama would pass a law requiring all beverage cans to be made out of aluminum, as some western states have done, a lot of litter would be eliminated. Recycling aluminum is also beneficial when it comes to conserving energy, because it takes 95% less energy to recycle aluminum than it takes to mine it. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
We hope to communicate to employers the various types of programs that are offered, many federally funded, and we also hope to give them information as to better handle, for example, unemployment payments or claims, particularly in the case of employees who leave for whatever reasons they may leave.
Do you think that some of the employers will be able to realize some savings in their operations that might help the economy in other areas?
Well, we're positive that if employers take advantage of the programs that are offered, whether they learn about them from the Employer's Digest or not, they not only can save a great deal of money, but they can enhance and improve the employment levels in the state, particularly for those people who need jobs.
Both District 5 candidates say drainage is the #1 problem in their area. They both say Janetta Ditch, which runs through the West Central District, has long been a breeding ground for mosquitoes and other pests. Luther Oliver says as councilman he has helped get funds to cover part of the ditch, and he hopes to cover more of it if re-elected. He also says in his term he's had every street resurfaced when needed and every pothole filled. He says he wants to cover Catoma Creek and get West Montgomery out of the floodplain. Oliver says that's one reason West Montgomery is in danger of dying. He is 60 years old, married, and has 4 children. He owns and operates a garage. 62-year-old Alonzo Seymour Sr. says one reason District 5 still has a drainage problem is that poor areas are used as tools to get federal funds for the city, and then the money is funneled out of the neighborhoods it was intended for. He also says he's angry about what he calls police brutality, especially in black neighborhoods. He says the city should have police precincts and more patrolling. Like Luther Oliver, he supports the idea of a police review board. Seymour would also like to see tours of the city given for senior citizens, and he and Oliver both want more recreational facilities for area youth. Seymour is married, has 2 sons, and is a retired medical technician. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Tour the jail on a regular basis. I do work very closely with the sheriff and the people upstairs in jail. And as far as I'm concerned, the administration of the jail, in whatever happens, whether or not it becomes a feasible alternative to relate today. Now, I'll open up by just not. But here it is, and I think you've got a copy, Matt.
Yeah.
Here's another copy because I don't need it. Basically,
from people who don't want to support their children. That's one program that's going to be seriously affected, and there are going to be mothers out there who ain't going to get child support, that are getting it because we have a county jail. I'm not talking about a chain gang philosophy either. And let me say this to you. When you're talking about road camps for county prisoners, you're not talking about putting rapists and murderers and vicious and violent criminals out there to do county road work. You're talking about misdemeanor criminals. So you do not have the security risk on a road camp that a state road camp would have, because you don't have that type of vicious killer out there. You have the misdemeanor criminal. Now, he may be a repeat criminal, but at least the security risk is not there, and I think it's something, it's time we have to face up to it, and we need to explore those possibilities. And I'm not going to try to do a selling job on that standing committee, Mr. Chairman, but I'm asking you as Chief Law Enforcement Officer for this county to let this standing committee that you have appointed investigate the possibilities of establishing road camps. It's $20 million for a jail or $500,000 for a road camp.
Happy about in the relationship between the thing, but it looks like to me that we need to take every
Amtrak's Floridian will continue to stop here in Montgomery despite a decision by Amtrak to discontinue the route. In Wichita, Kansas today, District Judge Frank Thies issued a temporary restraining order barring Amtrak from eliminating 3 of its 5 routes which were to be dropped October 1st. The judge, ruling on a suit filed by Kansas Attorney General Robert Steffen, cited Amtrak's failure to hold public hearings and draw up an environmental impact statement on the proposed cancellations. The 3 routes which have been extended for a 10-day period are the Floridian, which runs through Alabama from Chicago to Miami and St. Petersburg, the Lone Star from Chicago to Houston, and the North Coast Hiawatha from Chicago to Seattle. Yesterday, Alabama Attorney General Charles Graddick filed a similar suit in federal court in Birmingham. That case and the one in Kansas will be heard on October 11th, and once again the future of the Floridian and 2 other routes will be at stake. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
Shortly after Judge Thomas delivered the list to the federal courthouse, the release began. 13 of those set free will have to report for trial later. They were let go without bond. 6 had been charged with burglary, 1 with drug trafficking, and several others were in jail for grand larceny. Sources in the county jail say others in the jail are on minor charges including non-support and DWI, driving while drunk. They were not considered by the panel set up by Judge Varner. Those sources also told me many left in jail had less than 30 days to serve on their sentences, or were in because they could not pay fines of $200 or less. Inmate attorney Richard Shinbaum says he thinks today's release violates the Varner order. Persons on this list who were convicted of violent crimes, drug-related.
This is the power company's Service Restoration Command Center. The colored lines represent areas that have power now. 2 weeks ago, these maps were almost blank when the hurricane knocked out 20 of the 21 transmission lines into the city. After restoring the main power source, which took 2.5 days, the power company began replacing the system that distributes the power, including 7,000 poles, 3,500 transformers, and 322 miles of service wire. Of the 2,000 crewmen working 12 hours a day in Mobile, 1,800 of them are from power companies outside the area. The biggest problem in trying to restore power has been accessibility to downed lines.
Many times we can just put the wire back up, but cleaning it all out and getting it cleared so we can restore it is the biggest problem.
The most difficult problem is on Dauphin Island, where there is no power and no way to bring materials except by boat or air. This weekend, workers will begin using barges to bring in equipment and set up a temporary substation. That should be finished in 2 weeks and will provide enough power for lights and refrigeration until the bigger project of constructing a permanent line can be planned. Alabama Power Company officials say Hurricane Frederick probably caused the most damage any utility has ever suffered. The damage is so great that they won't even put a dollar figure on it. But still, they hope to have power going into every area of Mobile within a week. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News in Mobile.
There are a lot of state agencies busy on this last day of the fiscal year 1978-79. A lot of these people work in the state revenue department, where the last day of taxes are collected. On the last day of the fiscal year, the revenue department collected about $6.5 million. This included sales, income, lodging, and utility taxes. Alabama Power Company alone paid $3.4 million in utility taxes. The collection was deposited by the state treasurer and the total given to the state controller. Personnel in the controller's office then worked to close out the books.
Part of that process is to update the encumbrances for the year, and hopefully if everything runs smoothly for this weekend, Monday morning we will be open for business for the new fiscal year of 1980-81.
On Monday, the state will start with a clean slate as far as a budget is concerned, and perhaps even more significant is that budget itself, the first one of the Fob James administration. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
We anticipated that thing would end up in the Supreme Court anyway, so if we won or lost in the circuit court, we would have, one party or the other would have appealed it.
Did you win or lose from your standpoint?
Oh, I lost. Why?
Besides salary, including salary as one of the main things you lost?
Well, it'll be all appealed on Monday. We'll ask for a stay on that, too.
Tell you what they have.